Hello everyone and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Thursday, April 4th. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's video will be structured. We'll be going over a recap of yesterday's picks, seeing how they ultimately ended up turning out. After that, we'll move over to RotoWire, talk about the weather report for today overall, see if there's anything that will be majorly popping up. I believe it's just one game that we'll be watching for the 3-game main slate overall. And then after that, we'll go over to FanDuel, talk about my core picks. So it's going to be one pitcher, 4 hitters. Going to be a pretty interesting slate today. Nobody truly stands out. Going to be a good day to mix and match or play really light just in general. And then last but not least, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet on the Sports Affiliation website and talk about my top GPP teams to stack. On the cheat sheet, there's actually only going to be one team to stack, but I will mention 2 other ones just based on some past history as well. But without further ado, we can start with the recap of yesterday's picks. So yesterday, not the greatest day overall. We had Mitch Keller at pitcher. He was $8,600. Pitched pretty well versus the Nationals in the past. Unfortunately, it was not the case yesterday. So got to 19 points, so he was a mess. He was the 5th overall pitcher on yesterday's slate, which just tells you that pitching was not that great overall. I believe Tyler Glasnow was the top guy with like 34 points. Then the next 3 hitters, we had Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, and Cody Bellinger. All of these guys went 0 for yesterday, so really unfortunate there. They were all misses, so combined 0 for 13 between them. And then on the very opposite end, we had Yordan Alvarez at $3,900, got to 49.9 points. He was the top overall outfielder and the top overall hitter by a pretty wide margin yesterday. He had 2 home runs and just missed a third. So Yordan was the great play. Everything else kind of sucked yesterday, unfortunately, but you're going to have that sometimes with MLB DFS. Just kind of unfortunate sometimes when you get these 0 for days, especially for guys that did have previously good history versus their respective matchup. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to RotoWire and talk about that weather report for today's slate. So once again, it's only a 3-game main slate. The doubleheader with the Detroit Tigers and the New York Mets is not on it, and then the White Sox and Royals game is not on this slate as well. So I believe the only game with a real weather concern potentially is out in Washington once again with the Nationals and the Pirates. 46% chance of rain there. And then we only got a 2% chance in Minnesota, so not worried there. And then down in St. Louis, you got 17% chance, but not really too worried there overall. So should be a pretty safe day overall. I think all 3 of these games will ultimately end up going off. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about those core picks for tonight's slate. So once again, with it being a 3-game main slate, some of these core picks are going to be a little bit harder to pick. Once again, feel free to mix and match as you see fit. Pitching is kind of not the greatest today overall, so I did go with the guy that has the best past history versus respective matchup. That's Josiah Gray. Decent history versus Pirates in the past. Last year, he had 47 and 43 points versus them, so some pretty decent upside there. If you want to go with Pablo Lopez at the high end, you could definitely do it. He's the most expensive, but he does have some pretty hit-or-miss history versus the Cleveland Guardians in the past, so that is something to watch out for. And then, if you want to go to Lance Lynn, you could. Obviously, there's some upside there. Some of these Marlins hitters have done all right versus him. And then, Ryan Weathers on the opposite side of that game, not too interested in. You could go to Tanner Bybee if you think he does pretty well tonight versus the Minnesota Twins. Didn't do the greatest versus them last year, so that is something to keep in mind as well. Then for Pittsburgh, I think it was Martin Perez. You could definitely go with him, though, too, as well. But didn't really stand out in a major way versus the Nationals and doesn't have like a ton of upside due to the lack of strikeouts. So with all that being said, that's kind of how I ended up on Josiah Gray. He is the cheapest pitcher on the slate as well, although there's probably going to be money left over on the table today overall. So we're going to move down to hitters with first baseman Josh Naylor. He is 2 for 3 in his career versus Pablo Lopez. He has at least 1 hit in 5 out of 6 games this season. 2 of those games have been multi-hit games and 4 double-digit fantasy performances out of him, so it feels like a relatively safe play. Obviously his over did come yesterday, so maybe he starts the bad streak, but Pablo Lopez, as good a pitcher as he is, these Cleveland Guardians have hit him pretty well in the past. Then at second base, we're going to go with Luis Arraez here. He is 8 for 25 with 1 home run in his career versus Lance Lynn. Some pretty extensive history there, to be honest. It's a pretty slow start for Luis Arraez. I believe he's hitting like under 200 for a guy that hit way over 300 last year. His hits only in 4 out of his 7 games this year, only 1 multi-hit game. So maybe this is the game that he starts to get things right. It is a good matchup versus Lance Lynn, who is predominantly a fastball pitcher. So a guy like Luis Arraez could go off tonight. So there's kind of lack of high-end upside because he doesn't steal bases. He doesn't really hit home runs, but at $2,700, looks like a pretty decent value play overall. Then at third base, we're going Nolan Arenado. He is 1 for 2 with 1 home run in his career versus Ryan Weathers, the expected starting pitcher. For the Miami Marlins tonight, he is kind of off to a weird start to the season. He has at least one hit in 5 out of 7 games, but only one multi-hit game. Doesn't have a home run yet. Hasn't done too much to this point in time. So he's kind of at that pay down price tag of $3,000. Hopefully this is the night that he kind of starts to turn it around. But do like that upside going against Ryan Weathers, who, hasn't proven too much in his young MLB career. And then last but not least, in the outfield, ultimately ended up in Stephen Kwan. I didn't really love him for $3,000, but on this slate overall, price tags don't really mean too much unless you're playing Pablo Lopez way up at the top, maybe Tanner Bybee as well. But there's definitely a lot of money to spend and not a lot of high-end guys just in general. Kwan is 5 for 11 versus Pablo Lopez in his career. He's got at least one hit in 6 out of 7 games this year. 4 of those games have been multi-hit games, I believe. At least 3 with double-digit performances. So some decent upside there. Obviously a guy that could steal a base. Not going to offer much in terms of power. But at the same time, overall, it's not the greatest slate overall. So I kind of want some guys that feel a little bit safer just in general today. Obviously, if you want to go full-on Guardian stack, you could definitely do that. With like Josh Naylor. Bo Naylor does have some decent history versus Pablo Sandoval as well. Jose Ramirez and Andres Jimenez. Those would be the 5. A lot of different ways that can approach this slate, but with that being said, I think it's best to get over to the cheat sheet and talk about those top GPP teams to stack for tonight overall. So the only one that I did throw on my cheat sheet was the St. Louis Cardinals. They don't really have too much history versus Ryan Weathers in the past. Arenado does 1 for 2 with a home run, and then I believe it was Wilson Contreras 3 for 9, and I think it was 1 home run. It might actually be 2 versus Ryan Weathers. Can't remember off the top of my head. But the other 2 that I will mention here, Marlins going against Lance Lynn. There is a little bit of history there. Obviously, we talked about Luis Arraez. I believe Jazz Chisholm had a home run off him as well, so a little bit to be had there. Obviously, the Marlins are off to a pretty slow start just in general. And then once again, did mention the Guardians. Pablo Lopez is a good pitcher, but he has kind of struggled versus this Guardians team in the past, so wouldn't be surprised that that's the case once again tonight. But once again, 3-game main slate in total. Personally, I would spend just a little bit lighter tonight, but if you want to go out there, you want a 20 max like the nickel contest or something like that and get really creative with some of these lineups, you could definitely do that as well without blowing a bunch of change at the same time as well. If you want to do it with the quarter contest, you can definitely do that as well. So a lot of different ways that we can approach tonight's slate overall. Me personally, I'm probably just going to throw a cheap lineup in and then kind of go with the core that I have here and some other guys mixing and matching the rest of the way from there. That was the recap, weather report, core picks, and top GPP teams to stack for today's main slate. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to drop them down in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. If there's any other updates throughout the day, I will leave them down in the comments below, as well as some of those starting lineups. Hopefully I can get to all of them today. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a crazy week overall. Hopefully it ends up settling down just a little bit today overall, so do kind of apologize for that. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, we have MLB DFS Core Pick videos Monday through Friday, and then once a week, I am doing my UFL DFS video as well. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for BetUS, Parlay Play, and Prize Picks. If you are a brand new user on any one of those 3 sites, when you sign up, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Parlay Play and Prize Picks, it's a 100% match up to $100 on your initial deposit. And then for BetUS, it's a 125% match on your initial deposit up to $2,500. So some pretty great opportunities to be had out there. And then with that being said, if you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comments or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for today's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS this afternoon.